Good evening, everyone. Coming up on 8:09 on this Monday, June 30th, I'm Jose Sosaya with this latest edition of Wave Extra coming to you from the Wave Now studio. Of course, if you're joining us on the Wave Now app on your smartphone or your smart TV, I should say, as well as all the different social media channels. Always appreciate you joining us to start the week. Another opportunity to dive into local headlines and the big, interesting stories of the day. We're going to get started perhaps with those images and videos we want to share with you that kind of explain sort of how Monday can start like a very crazy beginning of the work week, could be easygoing, and it could end up looking like this. And what I mean by that is showing you just this visual on a very busy interstate. It was breaking news for us at 5 in the rush hour traffic coming into Louisville from Indiana. It was slow going. It looked like this tour bus caught on fire on I-65 South. Now, we know the fire started at around 4:10, just past the Kennedy Bridge. This was near the Jefferson Street exit. Now, the bus was blocking the left lane and the shoulder. Traffic was already slow going, of course, but a separate crash just past Oak Street was making things worse. So surely you were trying to avoid this part of the road as you were heading either back from work to home or vice versa. I believe in the time since, we have been able to see that a tow truck was able to take this tour bus away. So thankfully that was resolved, and that, to our knowledge, no one was hurt. But of course, whenever we do find out what the cause was, that anybody inside, if everything was okay, and if they're able to resolve it all, we'll let you know about those updates as soon as we get them. Okay, moving on to some other headlines, and this is dealing with perhaps impact of tariffs and the context of what's coming up to end the week, because the holiday is here, 4th of July, and apparently tariffs are already having some degree of impact on fireworks. Some retailers are saying they are not feeling that tariff-related strain just yet, but one of our reporters did want to go check in with a couple local vendors. What some said is that it's not this year that they're worried about, it's actually their supply for next year. And the reason for that, according to what our reporters learned, is because larger retailers were able to buy supplies from manufacturers in China before the tariffs went into effect. And so this is our crew visiting Wacky Willie's in Bullitt County today. They want to find out that most prices are comparable. They're pretty similar to last year. Owner Mike Kimsey tells us that's because his inventory also shipped out before those tariffs hit in April. Now, Kimsey owns 30 locations in 3 states, but he believes smaller retailers just could not compete like he could.
If you have a big enough business that you started ordering in December, January, February, March, and all that before the tariffs hit, then it didn't affect much. But some of the guys out there that run one location, one tent, or one store, or stuff like that, they don't even order their stuff till May. Well, those guys got hit hard.
And if you were looking for some alternatives, well, buying an American-made firework just wasn't going to be an option. It's something we discovered according to the American Pyrotechnics Association, that 99% of consumer fireworks that you buy in the U.S. are manufactured in China. And looking at this, though, some advice from retailers, at least looking forward to the future, is buy and enjoy the show now before those skyrocketing prices arrive next year. So that is their particular advice. Okay, more headlines for us here at 8:12 in the evening. So here's looking at Louisville Water Company. Looks like they're still busy doing the work they need to do along River Road. We're going to show you a map of where they're moving to. So take a look at this image we have. So this week they're going to focus their work on River Road between Blankenbaker Lane and Lime Kiln Lane. So something for you to keep in mind if you needed to move around the area for the rest of the week. It's going to be limited to local access only. Louisville Water telling us they're going to be staggered barricades in the area so that those who live nearby can still get through, coming in and out of work. This is going to impact the intersection of Woodside Road for you this week, and work in the area. A reminder is expected to last around 3 to 6 months. The entire project will continue through this year and into 2026. So a good reminder for you there. Just trying to manage as many traffic headaches as possible. Another milestone day to mark on this day, because it is June 30th, and the reason we say that, it is actually the last day that current GCPS Superintendent Dr. Marty Pollio is on the job after having led the district for the past 8 years in this top leadership capacity. I want to show you some images of when he was there to wave goodbye to the kids on their last day of school. Now, the most common words Pollio uses to describe his experience as superintendent, quote, difficult and challenging, but he's saying that in the context of navigating the COVID pandemic and trying to fix transportation issues. Again, a reminder of who's coming in to replace him, Dr. H. Brian Yearwood replacing Pollio. And Yearwood was chosen earlier this summer after what was considered an extensive search, Pollio starting his new role as president of Ivy Tech Community College tomorrow. And now to what was the big story of our Sunday, heading late into the night, and of course the ripple effects that we're seeing play out with tributes, flowers, kind words and memorials on social media and in other different forms of showing that emotion and tribute is in the horse racing world, of course, so integral to the history of Louisville in this part of the country. And the horse racing world still trying to process the passing of racing legend Dwayne Lucas. For those who follow the sport intimately, Lucas had been a staple on the backside at Churchill Downs, especially leading up to the Kentucky Derby, because that was the case whether he had a horse in the race or not. He was a presence there for sure. Excuse me. Yeah, just a little bit of a frog in my throat there. So Wave News Sports Director Kendrick Haskins had talked a little bit more about the passing of the Hall of Famer, and we're going to let him explain the context of his accomplishments over decades of career and, of course, decades of excellence. We're going to play that for you right now.
When it comes to horse racing royalty, it doesn't get any bigger than the man they nicknamed the Coach, Dwayne Lucas.
Wayne's been a presence at Churchill Downs dating back to 1989. Barn 44. I mean, everybody knows the Lucas Gap, right at the three-quarter pole.
I get up at 3 every day, and on 3:30 I'm out the door.
It's that drive, that will to win, that propelled Lucas to heights that seemed unimaginable.
I love the big arena. I love the competition of, going against my colleagues out here. It's a lot of fun for me.
Lucas, born Darrell Wayne Lucas on September 2nd, 1935, grew up in a small town in Antigua, Wisconsin. He actually got his start in the equine industry training quarter horses and wasn't too bad, winning 24 world championships in 10 years before switching to thoroughbreds, picking up his first win at Santa Anita in 1977, and the rest, as they say, is history.
I want to win it, so if we got a horse in it, I want to be competitive and win it.
And when he did, Lucas picked up his first Triple Crown win in 1980, winning the Preakness with Codex.
And there was nothing meek about her.
Lucas finally got his first Kentucky Derby win in 1988 with the filly winning colors, one of only 3 fillies to ever win the Run for the Roses.
Oh, I think this is the top of the world. From here you look down on everything. That's super.
Lucas would go on to win the Derby 4 times, the Preakness 7 times, including in 2024 when he became the oldest trainer to do so.
I thought his action down the backside was beautiful, and I knew that he was handling the track. I said, watch out, he's not going to quit. It never gets old at this level. I love the competition. I love to get in here with the rest of them, and there's a bunch of good guys who are in this race.
Lucas was also a 4-time winner of the Belmont Stakes and recorded a record 20 Breeders' Cup wins.
I don't get caught up as much in the excitement. I'll get, feel the excitement and everything when they stick them in the starting gate, but the build-up and everything that goes with it, I handle it a lot better at 90 years old.
Lucas was a 5-time Eclipse Award winner, and his horses won 25 year-end Eclipse Awards. Lucas retired with 4,953 career wins and will be forever remembered as a true legend.
Our thanks to Kendrick Haskins for putting all of that, of course, in a context. 2 little quick memorials here based on the people we've been talking to, leading up to finding out about Lucas's passing. And since Darren Rogers with Churchill Downs, who we're often in touch with, he put it in his own words as best as he could Saturday, was the quote, "The Derby was always better when Dwayne Lucas was in it." And now it's going to be hard for him to get used to stepping around the backside without the legend. And another touching, at least reference, of course, for those who knew Lucas and his nickname, the Coach. It was actually for a couple of reasons. One is that he actually did used to be a coach for high school basketball, so something that stuck with him. But then that transformed into coaching some of the biggest names in horse racing. We're talking luminaries in their own rights, like Todd Pletcher, Dallas Stewart, and Louisville's own Brad Cox, just to name a few. So certainly reflecting on the impact and the legacy that Dwayne Lucas has left behind. Coming up after the break, our deep dive into the latest of the testimony from down in Bowling Green. Again, we are back there taking notes and seeing what the jury is hearing in the trial of Brooks Houck and Joey Lawson when it pertains to Crystal Rogers' presumed murder and disappearance. Coming up after the break, like I said, you're going to hear my conversation with our legal analyst, Leland Hulbert, on today's testimony, the witnesses, and the different tidbits the prosecutors are using to try to build up their narrative. So let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with Wave Extra. We can jump right into it. So Monday, and it sounds like a couple interesting witnesses. I guess it's still that we're in that space where the prosecution's just adding more and more, as you've told me, building up that narrative. I guess I'll start with what we heard from Nick Houcks's ex. I believe her name is Amber, and I might not have gotten her exact full last name, but talk to me about sort of anything that stood out to you from what she had to say. Again, not because it's about Nick and because the trial is about Brooks, but sort of what value there is in having her explain everything she explained.
Well, the most compelling thing was where was Nick on the day of the murder or the disappearance? And apparently he was harder to get in touch with than he normally was. And he didn't answer texts. She didn't know where he was. I think the defense cleaned that up a little bit by saying that he'd often go to properties and help fix them up. But, as far as alibis go and, wanting to have a perfect alibi. His alibi would be he was in Texas on vacation or she knew where he was. Well, that's not what happened. So he was in town, he just was out of touch and couldn't be reached by her. So that tells me that there's some issues and that that there's something for the jury to ponder.
For sure. What about the pattern, perhaps? And I know we discussed it last week. In that, for sure, you might argue a worried partner would blast someone's phone, 10, 20 times in the 24 hours that you haven't seen them. And obviously, House's defense touched on the times that he did try to reach out to get her to come home. But what did you make of sort of the prosecution pointing out that, of course, other people in Crystal's life were obviously panicked, and it seems like he was a little more selective in who he would text or respond to. But when the time came to get calls from people in his inner circle, he was much quicker to respond.
So if I'm the prosecutor, I hammer that home. I mean, Brooks Houck has had 10 years to think about why he did or didn't do certain things. But in reality, anyone who has a significant other go missing is going to call presumably more times, is going to drive around, is going to call the police, is going to call his brother, the police officer, and call all her family and his family. And that just didn't happen here. Now, does that mean he did something? No. But his behavior, I think, will be hit home by the prosecution. And he has some explanation, but I'm not sure how strong that explanation is, saying, oh, well, she occasionally didn't come home. And, everyone in this case has warts. There is no perfect witness, even Crystal, who's, unfortunately deceased. And then you've got Brooks and you've got the Lawsons and you've got all these family members. There's drugs and relation and bias and all sorts of things that can be argued. But at the end of the day, that's what the attorneys will do in their closing arguments. They'll take the pieces they want and argue them for both sides. And there's problems on both sides. The question is there enough for prosecution to overcome beyond a reasonable doubt? And that's what we'll find out.
To your point about the warts that we can't seem to shake off, it seems like a lot of the witnesses, I don't know if you'd argue if by comparison, a witness like Charlie Girdley has way more warts than the prosecution would like. But you talk to me about the value in, despite the documented issues he was dealing with, to say, this is what he offered and, in a round of different interviews, but here he is in 2025, similar to what we heard, one of the witnesses you and I talked about last weekend about the KSP interviews, and sort of this time around just reaffirming in their mind that what they said about what they heard about Crystal was true. Talk to me about the sort of the nuances with Charlie's testimony today.
Yeah, I think the defense will probably say he's a wild card. He's not credible because he's on meth. He was up for 3 days or 5 days or whatever he said. And at the end of the day, that's what the jury will assess. How credible was his testimony? It appears that it was inconsistent. Now, is it inconsistent because the police were pressuring him, or it's inconsistent because he was worried about what would happen to him if he told the truth? But, if I was the prosecution, I would draw from whatever consistencies there are. Surely there's 3 or 4 things that he said in every statement as he knows the house. He was around the house. He knew of cars. He knew, whatever he said that is consistent, I would point that out. And then both sides will point out the inconsistencies and make justifications for those. But I think he was a bit of a wild card witness, but I can see why the prosecution used him, because he had some telling information, at least in one of his statements, about what happened around the time of the disappearance.
Was it interesting at all to you bringing in this gentleman who, I guess the context that he was brought into this as a hunter who would have been around the property? I don't think that necessarily tips the scale one way or the other, but for him to have offered the testimony that if you're the defense and saying, I couldn't hear a sign of a struggle or anything that sounded violent, I guess, I don't know if obviously the prosecution wants to establish someone who would have been around the property, but do you see that as a detriment at all? Or is it just something that at least it gets us closer to that kind of middle ground of the truth here?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the prosecution introduced him to show something small, and the defense tried to drive a bus through the fact that, well, you didn't hear any screaming. Well, we don't know how she died. So maybe there was never any screaming. Maybe there was never a fight. I mean, we have no idea. So I think it kind of cuts both ways. I don't think it's a bad witness for the prosecution or good witness for the defense, but every single one of these witnesses with their warts that we talked about, both sides are going to draw little nuggets. And if a good attorney is assessing this, they're going to build a closing. So each one of these witnesses is a building block for their closing argument, and who can tie it together the best. If the prosecution can do that like they did in the first trial, I think it's trouble for the defendants. But if the defendants can poke more holes than were poked in the first trial, I think that helps the defense.
And the one last thing before I let you go, and I guess it's in the discussion we were having in the newsroom. I don't know if Greg, my producer, he flagged this one as the most interesting to him, was the whole submission testimony from this sheriff's deputy about the car, about the white Buick, and the pattern, I guess, to try and sell it. And it sounds like there was a hair found in the trunk. And we've been talking about sort of wanting that forensic evidence to try and prove something. But here we have the mention of who the car belonged to, what they found. Did you feel? I guess I'll rephrase in saying, how strong of an asset do you think this is for the prosecution?
Well, it's a little unclear with not seeing the trial and just reading the notes, how strong that hair was identified. Was it 100% conclusive, or just it suggests it may be Crystal's, or someone related to the case? I think that is a big deal. And then all these people seeing a white car, and now was it this white car? And the fact that it seems to be the right color as one of the cars involved in this, and then the fact that the scientific evidence can possibly help identify or eliminate people from that hair, I think it's compelling, because we all sort of thought a month ago, before we heard anything, physical evidence was a problem. And in a circumstantial case without a body, you need as much physical evidence as you can possibly get, and you need it to be reliable. I'm not sure if we're there yet, but there are pieces that I don't think we knew as much about the first trial that we're learning a little more about for this trial that I think are helpful.
Anything I haven't asked you that on notes and the stuff you were scanning that you wanted to touch on before I let you go?
No, I think it was interesting about this Nick Hauk, who it's really hard to tell how much we know as people that have been following this trial versus the jury. But certainly he is a name that keeps coming up. He's someone that has been targeted, an unindicted co-conspirator, and then and he's involved moving things from trunks, telling his brother not to talk, and then sort of disappearing at the time that Crystal disappeared, or at least somewhere around that realm. I think it's interesting, and he's going to be lumped in with Brooks Hauk because it's his brother. And most people, it's not a big leap for people to think a brother would help a brother, especially a cop who knows how the cops are going to investigate. And if your brother commits a crime, probably your blood is thicker than your badge, where you're going to help the brother. I think that can be presumed. Now, I don't know if that's what actually happened, but I think the more Nick looks like he's discredited, the more it hurts Brooks. And I think we saw that a little bit today.
Welcome back to Wave Extra. Jose Sosaya joining you here at 8:34. What I'm about to show you is a conversation that I had with a local mental health advocate, Molly Jones of the Pete Foundation. Now, the context of our conversation is an update that's been reported, at least, on a national level, when it comes to a decision on a policy level by the federal government to stop providing services for LGBTQ plus youth who called the 988 suicide crisis hotline. And so that would be discontinued coming up on July 17th. That's provided by SAMHSA through Health and Human Services. And the point for the option there was if you pressed 3, if you were someone in need wanting to speak to a trained LGBTQ plus health counselor to try and provide that support in the moment. Well, the decision is now to rescind that funding. There have been groups that have been supporting at least providing that resource ever since it was started in 2022, and it received nearly 1.3 million calls from people in distress needing that kind of help. So we sat down to talk to the Pete Foundation, which in general just provides those resources, whether it's through its big music festival or connecting people to therapy and just trying to talk about that emotions and for parents to support their kids and vice versa. And so we had part of that conversation this afternoon with Molly Jones. So you're going to listen to that in just a bit. The way you might explain what the Pete Foundation does to someone who's never heard of them before, how would you describe that?
We advocate for increased awareness about mental health with a primary focus on adolescent mental health, because we feel like if we can get mental health and mental wellness addressed at the adolescent level, then people can grow up to be young adults who are mentally healthy.
Was this something you've been interested in as an advocate for some time? Was it just an issue that called you? Is there a connection or a story that motivated you at all?
Yes, so I lost my son Pete to, he lost his battle with depression actually in December of 2016. And his brothers, he had 3 brothers and 1 sister, and we just felt like we had to do something because Pete was such a wonderful guy. And we found out that he had suffered for so many years of his life.
And when obviously you and your children are discussing how you could form the foundation, find the infrastructure and support, were you at all surprised in meeting people who unfortunately had kind of lived a similar experience and you're comforting each other, but in saying like, gosh, this experience, I wish it wasn't perhaps as common as now I'm discovering?
Well, yes, that's true. It did become more common in my knowledge base, but what really surprised me more was the people who supported the idea of getting rid of the stigma and opening the door to understanding mental health. Because even if they haven't lost a loved one to suicide, everybody understands the suffering of mental illness.
Mm-hmm. How have you, since you started the Pete Foundation, have you seen where the trend goes and the pattern goes, or have you gotten a sense maybe just, for us in our grassroots community that support has been growing year over year?
Yeah, it's been growing. And of course, COVID kind of brought it out into more everyday conversation. We need to keep working on that. We need to provide more education and information so that our conversations can be more informed. But yeah, the topic is opening up.
Mm-hmm. And so the context of what's going on lately, and I guess the conversation, maybe Christy talked about it, so forgive me if you and I haven't discussed about particularly this decision in funding. And it seems like the decision at a federal level is not to totally dismiss 988, which by all accounts is a life-saving tool.
Yes.
But it seems that there's a choice for young teenage LGBTQ kids to have the group that has been, I guess, at the forefront of that service no longer provide that funding for them. I don't know, do you have any links or communication ties with anybody at the, I believe it's the Trevor Project? Is that-
Yes,
do you-
it's the Trevor Project. No, we don't have any direct communication with them. We do support their work, obviously, and their work is very important. I think it's a shame that that funding has been cut. I know the Trevor Project will continue to stay strong because they are saving lives. And we at the Peak Foundation feel like any life saved is as valuable as any other life saved.
Because to you perhaps, Molly, this doesn't have to be and it shouldn't be a partisan issue, right?
I would hope not. I would hope that it's not, because we're talking about lives and we're talking about suffering. And I don't see how we can make that partisan. One side supports it and one side doesn't. That doesn't make any sense.
For example, with the Peak Foundation, for the resources that you're providing, who have been like the biggest partners and supports? Is that something you're looking for regular day folks who want to contribute, community partner groups? Is it sort of that mix of big and small
Yes.
contributions?
Yes, it's a mix of big and small. In terms of financial support, we get everything from $5 to thousands. And every amount is greatly appreciated. We also partner with many different agencies, not only just in mental health, but in any healthcare segment. And we have people reach out to us to help them navigate the healthcare system. And mostly I'd say who reaches out to us are parents with with children who are suffering and young adults.
I'm curious, your perspective on, that seems like a crucial line of defense. What is the value if, someone was wanting to make that phone call, and on top of that, you could tailor it because they've their life experience because of who they are.
Right.
They just don't feel like anyone's listening to them. I would imagine you think like, well,
Right.
that's critical.
It's absolutely critical, being able to tailor it to the person who's suffering, and for the person who's suffering to know that the person they're speaking with understands, has an understanding, is critical. It's life and death critical. And why we wouldn't offer that when we have a group that's high risk, and we know we can tailor the support to that group and that risk, it doesn't make sense to not do it for whatever group that is, however they are defined.
When I was reading the official statement, the rationale behind the decision to, I guess, get rid of this particular hotline is to not silo the services and put them together. It sounds like you might be saying that might not work the way they're saying it does. Why or why not?
Because this is healthcare, okay? And healthcare always has to be tailored to what the need is and what the illness is. And with high-risk groups, we can tailor the care. Just like you might tailor cardiac care for somebody who has a heart issue, or oncology care for somebody who has cancer. Well, within mental health, we can tailor the care based on the need for that individual. And individuals can be grouped, so high-risk groups like I spoke about. For instance, veterans, they're a high-risk group. I've never served this country in a war, and so I'm not going to understand what that veteran might be suffering like one of his comrades may. So we need to tailor the care for the veterans, and it's the same with the LGBTQ group. We can tailor that care. We can provide them a therapist, someone to talk to that has a better understanding of what they're suffering.
The advent of having this tailoring option because someone on the other line, was able to get the help that they needed. But we're talking probably in the leagues of more lives saved than, is probably comfortable talking about it. It's like saying that this is making a huge difference.
It is making a huge difference. It makes a big, big difference. Yeah, that's all I can say. I mean, and it's not only a big difference in terms of, it's a big difference in terms of lives, people living versus dying. And these are young people. They have a lot to offer this nation. They have a lot to offer their loved ones.
Do you find that in reaching out, maybe parents when they reach out to groups like the Peat Foundation or the Trevor Project, is there sort of an educational aspect for things that just maybe just plain ignorance on their part, just they didn't know, but is that sort of something you notice and like saying like maybe they just in their adult life they never thought about it this way.
Right.
This is their child going through something, and so is it also about empowering adults in this way to be the advocate for their kids?
Yes, it is. And a lot of that ignorance, not quite ignorance, but lack of understanding or lack of awareness is brought about because we had a stigma. So since we had a stigma, we didn't talk about it. If we didn't talk about it, then we weren't made aware of what resources look like, where to find them, how to know if they're effective or not for your child or for yourself. So yeah, that's a lot of what we do, is just open the door to the idea of what resources are available.
For you and the foundation, what are you all working on any, new projects or ideas, or just strengthening the support resources that you're already providing?
We are working on a few projects. We have projects centered around understanding whether you're drinking alcohol to avoid or cope with an underlying mental or emotional crisis or struggle. And if that's the case, we have resources. And again, we're opening the door to what those resources might look like. We also have a good project that's in the pilot phase right now that's centered around helping children be able to express their feelings. And also, on the flip side, helping adults have that conversation with the child about how they're feeling, why it feels like that, and what might happen, what they could do to improve those feelings if they're not good.
What are the ways that people can reach out to you and to the Peat Foundation?
They can reach out, thepeatfoundation.org. Google the Peat Foundation, you'll find us. We also have a music festival coming up, so they can go to thebigstomp.com. And at the music festival, we open that door to the idea of what kind of resources are available and what therapy looks like and so on, along with having music and food trucks and craft vendors.
With what's going on with this hotline, sounds like it could be disheartening, but between the work that you and your organization and others are doing, are you optimistic? What's sort of your outlook about where the stigma will be and where the resources will be?
The stigma is going to continue to go away. Everybody wants it to go away. So many people are working to get rid of the stigma. That effort isn't going to stop, and nobody's going to be able to stop that. I also believe that removing the LGBTQ plus component of the hotline, I believe that that'll change. We'll right that ship one way or another. I'm not sure how it'll happen, but it's an important need, and it was saving lives. It will save lives.
Do you find that where perhaps government makes a policy choice to no longer support it, that at least in the private, and I don't mean to say it as coldly as saying in the private sector, but from a grassroots level, a local level, advocate level like yourself, that someone will come in to fill those gaps?
I think that they may. Yeah, I'm not sure logistically how that would happen in terms of will the 988 number be able to allow that option. It's very important that option be on 988. I hate to always say what government won't do, the private sector will fill in, but sometimes that's what we have to do until government says, hey, this is something we need to be doing. But it's lives. It's lives, and we need to save them.
Again, our thanks to Molly Jones with the Peat Foundation for that conversation this afternoon. All right, that's going to do it for us tonight on this edition of Wave Extra. Reminder, you can always connect with us every night on the Wave Now app on your smart TV, on all of our different social media channels. Feel free to reach out to all of our different platforms by phone or email, things that are on your mind. And of course, it's an opportunity to have conversations and look into these stories, the things that are of interest to you, impacting the community here that's in our backyard. And of course, we'll have much more insight, reporting updates if you tune in tonight on Wave News at 11. Join myself, or the weather team, of course, and our reporting team. We will be here with the latest headlines, breaking details. Wave News at 11. Appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us on Wave Extra.